This is the Triumph Daytona 660, new for 2024 and hoping to mix it up in the middleweight affordable sports bike segment. But is it any good? And should it be on your shortlist if you're looking for a bike that's quick and fun, but that doesn't break the bank? Well, I've been lucky enough to borrow this one for the past couple of weeks, and so in this video we'll go through the good and bad with the 10 key things that you need to know about it. Now first up, we have to talk about the looks because I'm sure you've noticed this rather striking sticker pack from SKDA Moto. And I'd say the Daytona 660 is a really nice looking bike anyway, but this certainly takes it up a notch and gives it a bit more of that sporty edge. Now generally I think SKDA do a lot of motocross stuff, but if you look on their website, there's loads of different colorways for the Daytona 660, and they're pretty reasonable as well at about $290, which I think is a good price considering it completely transforms the look of your Daytona and also protects the paint underneath, which is going to preserve a little bit of resale value. As standard though, you can choose from Carnival Red, Snowdonia White or Satin Granite. And yeah, while they may not be quite as popping as this sticker pack, I'd actually say it's a really classy looking bike that's nicely designed with some neat little details that do tie it back to previous gens of the Daytona. The only slight criticism I might have is that the tail section is a little bit short. I think I prefer the longer seat unit of the Daytona 675. But overall, I'd say the looks are definitely a strength of the Daytona 660 and it's one of the best looking in this market. But more than that, I think the biggest reason to consider buying one of these Daytona 660s is for this engine. It was already really good in the other variants of the 660 bikes, so the Trident and the Tiger Sport, but they've made a couple of key changes here that I think make it significantly better. The first one is that they've added a little bit of top-end power, so it's now 94 horsepower at 11,250 RPM. So that's a good 14 horses more than the other two bikes, and it also makes it look really competitive amongst the other bikes in this segment like the Yamaha R7 or Suzuki GSX ATAR. But the other thing that I think really does help this bike is the fact that they've added a third riding mode of Sport. You see, the Trident, to be fair, is designed to appeal to younger and newer riders, and so the throttle response is fairly soft and gradual, understandably in the rain mode, but also in the standard mode of road. This one though feels a lot more peppy if you stick it in the sport mode, and there's a lot more response from the throttle. And what I think's really impressive is the fact that they've done that at the same time as preserving that smoothness on and off the throttle. So look, I think that this bike has done a really good job of still appealing to newer riders if you keep it in one of the less aggressive modes, but there's definitely a bit more excitement and engagement available for anyone who's got a bit more experience. Now, I will say that being a triple, it might not quite have that bottom end grunt and kick of a torquey parallel twin which you'll find elsewhere in this market, nor does it have the real top-end revvy rush that you'll get with an inline 4, but I'm a huge fan of a 3-cylinder bike. You'll see my own Tiger 800 here behind me because it has that brilliant balance that gives it lots of mid-range, which I think is really usable for road riding. In second or third gear, which you're obviously using a lot, between 4,000 and 8,000 RPM, this bike feels super quick to accelerate, lots of fun, and pretty much always managed to put a grin on my face when I was doing those shorter, quick road rides. It's only perhaps a little bit of a shame that these Triumph 660s are not particularly loud at the exhaust, and there aren't any options in their accessories catalogue to fit something a little bassier or louder. Then you've got to consider that the whole system is welded as well, so if you wanted to go third party and look for a slip-on, you'd actually have to fit a full system, which is going to be quite a bit more expensive. And so yeah, I think for most people, they're realistically going to end up sticking with the standard exhaust. What I will say though is that under acceleration there's actually quite a lot of airbox induction noise from this bike, to the point where it actually seems pretty loud and perhaps makes the exhaust system a bit of a non-issue, and I think that's probably by design. You see, with the quest for more power on this bike, they fitted a larger airbox, but also moved it from under the seat, which you'll find on the Trident and the Tiger Sport, to up between the fuel tank and the headstock, so it's really making most of its noise up in the cockpit where you're really going to hear hear it. For me, a triple soundtrack can really enhance the riding experience, and so that's another big plus for the Daytona 660. So look, those are some of the real highlights for me of this bike, but I will say elsewhere it does feel a little bit more balanced and perhaps a little bit reserved. Take, for example, the handling, where it is quite nimble and light on its feet at just over 200 kilograms curb. You get great tyres in the form of Michelin's Power 6s, so plenty of grip and reassurance. And I also think the Showa suspension with this separate function big piston fork does a decent job of balancing comfort and support, but still, this isn't a super twitchy, fast-turning sports bike like you'll be used to if you're coming from like a proper super sport. This bike, it feels like, has been much more designed to fit the market that they're targeting, with it being a little more chilled out and balanced, and so yeah, not as aggressive, but I will still say thoroughly pleasant to ride at sort of moderate to quick road speeds. It's a similar story with the braking as well. These are certainly an upgrade on the two-pot Nissins that you'll find on the other Triumph 660 bikes, with 4-piston radially mounted calipers on 310mm discs made by J1 on Triumph's behalf. So yeah, there's a touch more feel and power and crispness than the Trident and Tiger Sport, for example, but they're still fairly approachable, fairly gradual and soft at the lever, and so they won't be throwing you over the bars with the slightest dab on the brakes. On top of that, this riding position is in the middle ground as well. You've got clip-on bars, but they're not super aggressive and low. And while the seat is a little bit up and back versus the Trident, so this comes in at 810mm as opposed to 795, it's still easy to get both feet down for someone like me who's 175 centimeters or 5'9". On the road, it feels really approachable and usable, and it's a fairly small bike, so I think most people are going to find it easy to get on with. But I will say there is still just about enough room to slip your bum back and get into a tuck when you do start to ride quicker, and that's not always the case with some of the competition like the Ninja 650, for example. If you do want something a little more aggressive, then I might suggest you look at perhaps the Yamaha R7 or the Kawasaki ZX4RR. But realistically, I think for most people, if you're not doing track days all the time and that sort of thing, and you just want a sports bike that you can really use on the road, then realistically, this is probably going to be right in the sweet spot. On the tech front, well, I think the cockpit is defined by the dash, which is part inverted LCD at the top for the basic riding information, and then part TFT at the bottom with a small screen that's about 2 inches. This is becoming really common across the Triumph lineup now, with the 660 bikes, the Street Triple R, and the Scrambler 1200X. Now, on the one hand, it really is quite impressive as to how many features they've managed to cram into it. You've got connectivity available if you pay for the Bluetooth module, and that opens up navigation, handling calls if you've got a headset, and also music and media playback. And look, while the menus are nicely laid out and fairly easy to use to administer some of the settings and rider aids and modes, you know, it has started to look pretty small now, especially when you get in proper full-size TFT displays on bikes at increasingly affordable price points, including some of the immediate competition. That's why for me, I'm running a quad lock on the bike here, because you get more screen space for some of the smartphone features and navigation. And so it's a great opportunity to give them a huge thanks for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. On this particular bike, I'm using their fork stem mount Pro, which is absolutely ideal for a sporty little number like this and looks really nice and clean. On top of that, I've got the vibration dampener to protect the phone's camera from any harmful vibes from the bike. And then I'm just using their simple black buckle to keep it nice and clean. But if you did spec up the USB accessory port on this bike, you could also run a cable to their wireless charging head, which means you never need to worry about keeping your phone juiced up. So look, do check out the links down in the description below to pick up a similar setup for your bike. And also down there, you'll find a discount code specifically for my viewers. Now, I suppose with the dash, you know, they've got to make some decisions here and there to hit a fairly aggressive price point. And that's exactly what they've done with the white version of this bike starting at £8,595. When you stack it up against some of the competition like the R7, the GSX 8R, the Aprilia RS660, the Kawasaki ZX4RR, it does look like decent value, and it's pretty much the same as the Honda CBR 650R. Now, there are probably a couple of accessories I'd look at fitting, like that USB port. The quick shifter as well on these 660s is very good and not actually fitted to this press bike, but I'd be looking to have that. And then also you are going to pay a little bit extra for the black paint job or the red if you want one of those. But overall, I'd say that base starting price does look really quite good. So look, overall, I'd say the bike can pretty much stand toe-to-toe with most of the competition in most fields, even if it isn't particularly edgy in most regards. The handling is fun, but it's not too aggressive. The ergonomics are a little bit sporty, but not uncomfortable. There's some nice tech as well, but it is slightly pared back with the price. And so the question still remains, you know, despite all that, should this still be on your shortlist for a well-priced middleweight sports bike? Well, I would say absolutely yes, and that's for one reason, and it's the engine. It's absolutely the star of the show with this bike, and whilst it was already good in the Tiger Sport and Trident, I actually owned a Trident and really enjoyed the engine. You know, that extra bit of power and that sports riding mode have just taken it up a notch to make it exciting enough for a sports bike like this. And then also you got the fact that a triple is unique in this market. There are plenty of parallel twins, a couple of inline fours, but what makes this bike feel really fun to ride is that mid-range and also the triple soundtrack, which they've done a really good job of enhancing. So yeah, thoroughly recommend checking this one out and at least taking it for a demo, but as always, let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. Also, if the Trident or the Tiger Sport looks like more so your cup of tea, then I've got a comparison of those two bikes, which I'll stick on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch. Do hit subscribe as well if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.